Hello everybody, I'm Mango Thunderslice here and again on the wide open freeways of California with the beautiful puffy white clouds, and I am pleased to announce that our second baby girl, Aria Thunderslice, is born into this world as of Wednesday, April 8th at 1:58 in the afternoon, and it was very wonderful home birth. Aria was born in a tub, a big water tub in our living room, into my arms, and it was just a magical experience. A lot easier than Isla's birth for Space Panther, and that's very good. And so starting out the video with all the positive things, because everything that really matters in my universe is in perfect order and aligned with the higher spheres and in total command of the lower ones. And but so I mean, apart from that, everything's, apart from the world, everything's good, right? But otherwise, we're moving into the Eschaton, right? We're moving into what has to be the end times in some sort of prophecy, basically when the Fed monetizes junk bonds and 10 million people are laid off within a matter of 2 weeks, and the entire world shuts down for the sake of a virus that in all likelihood, when all the dust settles, will finally be attributed a mortality rate of somewhere around 0.1 to 0.2%, which is essentially the same as the seasonal flu, for the record. That we sacrificed trillions in economic output and basically pricked the 2.5 quadrillion credit derivatives bubble, all for the sake of a fraction of a percent of the population who hate to be that guy, but there are reasons that people get sick, whether it's COVID-19 or otherwise. The body is not a probabilistic universe. It is a mechanistic, well, I don't want to say it's totally a mechanistic universe. Biology isn't totally equated to a machine, but it is mechanistic in the sense that there is a cause and effect. This world and this medical system likes to pretend like, oh, things just happen to you. It's just your random genetics and these random interactions of, particles in the world with your genetic code. And that's an aspect of it, but that too is a subject of cause and effect. And with the more that we learn in epigenetics, the more that we realize that codons of the DNA are like light switches, and they are turned on and off by the exterior, methyl shells around the DNA code, right? Methylation is how the codons are turned on and off. And, some people have a greater or lesser capacity for methylation. Just to get a little technical, but this is something that affects my, family line. It's likely that my daughters probably both have what's known as an MTHFR mutation, which basically affects the methylation process. But in any case, it's just important to realize that, how many times have you heard, a boomer or otherwise, a person just chalk up whatever their condition is to their genetic code, right? It's just my genetics. It's in my family line. There's nothing I could do about it. It just happened to me, right? And I, across the board, say that's bullshit, right? Even if you got hit by a train, right? Why were you, unless somebody threw you, first of all, if you got thrown onto the tracks, why'd you get thrown onto the tracks? There's a cause for that, even if it's, hard to stomach. The other question is, why were you on the tracks and nobody threw you, right? There's a reason that everything happens, whether or not you want to actually own up to it, man up to it, and own the consequences of that eventuality. Because it is hard to recognize that everything that happens in the universe is your fault. And every time you get sick, it is your fault. And yes, somebody got you sick, and somebody maybe chose to come into the office who was sick. Somebody didn't choose to wipe their hands, right? One person's lack of sanitation, became your problem. And that's all real too. But the strength of a person is in their capacity to own up to mistakes that they did not commit, right? And the weakness of a person is in their capacity to not own even the smallest mistakes of themselves, right? That is what strength and weakness is in psychology and in power and in straight psychic terms. What is your capacity and what is your claim to capacity? Because if you've got a claim to capacity much larger than your actual capacity, you will always be a liar. You will always be full of shit. You will always be a fiat credit system. You will always be a gambler. You will always be just, casting your dollars to the wind and hoping that they flow back in your direction. However, if your capacity is much greater than your claim to capacity, then, the world literally is your oyster, and, every single experience becomes a game. And it's really just about choosing how you interact with this world and what cards you play at any given time, because the entire deck is yours. And, whether or not anybody else knows it, it's all there right in your hand. In fact, you've got multiple decks. And, that's just something to keep in mind, not just for feeling good about your daily attitude, but that is, even that, right? What is the placebo effect, right? It is mind over matter, acknowledged in the barest, mundanest of terms that materialist science can offer. It's just, the placebo effect. It's just, basically when your mind changes your body and cures a disease because, it thinks that you've taken the medicine, right? It's just, they write it off as if it's something totally inconsequential. But the funny thing is, a placebo has a certain success rate that is greater than random chance, and that's why they call it the placebo effect. And they have to, in order to prove that a drug works, that it's efficacious, they need to prove that it works better than a placebo. But the placebo sometimes is hard to beat because people's minds is more important than most drugs. And if a person is resolute in not getting better, sometimes even a drug won't help them. Not to say that it's all just a matter of attitude. There are aspects of the cell's biology, and there's, everybody has a time to die ultimately in the end. None of us are immortal, ultimately. But it's about choosing when and how we cross over back into that world, through that membrane, through the time warp. And right, it's sad to see people leave before their time is up. But it's not sad when people leave and their time is up, right? I wept, for a brief period for my grandfather, but it's, he lived a glorious life. He lived a beautiful life. At that point, it is just, all right, have a good ride, sailor, and I'll see you next time. It's nothing tragic. It's actually selfish to be overly morose about a person's death when it was in the proper circumstances, when they died as they wanted to die, surrounded by family and, leaving behind only, pain and a frail body, off for new adventures, as they say. Bilbo Baggins style. Right, but we want people to be healthy, we want people to be strong, and the way to do that is through the aforementioned attitude shift, because everything ultimately is in your control if you resolve it to be, and that's the way this universe is set up. And people who disagree with that statement are probably fat and unhealthy themselves and dealing with some sort of chronic illness that they are unwilling to confront the causal foundations of. And so, again, this whole attitude thing is just a sheen, a cover for their own weakness, to address their own structural failings. And that's very hard. So that's very bitter soup for a lot of people to taste and sip upon. But ultimately, it's the most bitter of soups that ultimately will heal you. And that's not even a metaphor. That's literally true. There are things in this planet that will heal whatever you are dealing with. I mean, except for death. We can't bring people back from the dead, but we can make the sick, we can make the unwell well, and we can bring life into the body of those who are near death. And it's through the plants. It is through the fruits and the mushrooms and the seeds. And, I'm not a vegetarian or a vegan anymore, but I absolutely still am a druid, and I absolutely do still acknowledge the etheric fractal patterns of each of the different species of these plants and what they do for the body, right? Right now can't see too much about cramp bark. I forget, Viburnum preciosa or something, but that's just one that Panther's taken right now, which helps the uterine wall contract back to its original dimensions. Apparently the stuff that we have is not doing the job very well right now. But anyway, plenty of herbs do things. The reason I have a job is because of a specific herb, cannabis. produces a range of different effects. It's a very powerful herb, and it is not a drug. And the fact that it can't be made into an effective drug, Marinol be damned, is because it is the entourage effect. There is something about the biology that is irreproducible, that is not able to be put into a drug, because it is a bandwidth, a frequency. It is not a molecule. It is not a particle. It is a frequency and a spectrum of frequencies. And all these terpenes and phenols and different biochemical, physical manifestations are all just tuning of the ether. It's all just little micro-tuning of the ether, and it's all just interaction phonetically and geometrically and harmonically with the body, because we are not primarily material beings either. And again, as Tesla said, we are receivers of a signal. When the radio breaks, does the signal cease? No, it just ceases to be received by that receiver. And so, that's why, again, I don't grieve for the dead. I grieve for the tragic circumstances of life. And that's really what we're fighting. And that is not the same thing as fighting death, because I'm not afraid of death. I don't live my life in fear of it. I mean, the more children that I have, the more that I have a subconscious fear. I don't want to leave this world. I'm not as reckless as I was 10 years ago, but I definitely have a lot more to live for. And so my intensity of living is much greater. And, I weep for the people who have all of the abundance and prosperity and menial challenges in front of them. Oh, sorry about that. Mind the gap. Plan for everything, including your SD card space. Anyway, what I was saying is that, there's people who in this, very abundant society still find ways to create problems. And without direction, people, all they do is create problems because they don't have any actual focus for their activities that would otherwise be productive. And anyway, I guess what I'm leading into is Bill Gates and this whole, mandatory vaccination and immunity-proof certificates, right? Bill Gates is out here saying that, and a lot of other people, a lot of high-powered imperial stooges are out saying that we essentially need digital or otherwise immunity certificates for those who have either had the coronavirus or have gotten the vaccine, which hasn't even been invented yet. And that we can't even lift ourselves off of lockdown until we have these immunity certificates. And that is a shitty idea, and it's not feasible. And again, this is the whole, cover story that they've used to, do the microchips. Like, oh yeah, you need a microchip so that if you're unconscious, the hospital know what vaccines you've had and what blood type you have. It's like, that's such a dumb argument. It doesn't even make any sense. You could take somebody's, people have medical records otherwise. This is basically just suggesting that they don't, need their otherwise medical system, and it's not functioning properly. But it's like selling 5G for telecommuting. Like, we already have internet. We already have broadband. Who exactly is telecommuting on a wireless network, on the cellular network? It just seems like kind of an asinine point to sell 5G in response to, the new upsurge in demand for telecommuting. But that's how it is. People will buy, dumb sales pitches and dumb arguments as long as they themselves are, munching on the fluoride and the, GMO corn syrup and drinking the, drinking aspartame sodas, right? Their brain is in a diminished electrical state and a diminished psychological capacity. And especially when they're watching television, right, puts their brain in an alpha state where they're taking suggestions as commands. It's really not hard to understand how the society has gotten as insane as it has. It's because of the, systematic mind control program that's been built into our very culture as a, mass consumer culture. And it doesn't have to be that way. Yes, this is a deliberate, malicious influence, and it's, also the same influence that controls the Federal Reserve, who has now monetized the entire system and is buying literally everything. The price discovery has now ceased to exist and the free market is basically gone. And I'm not very super upset about this because I haven't been involved in really the stock market for several years now, for a couple of different reasons. But ultimately we have to move into this final stage of the hyperinflation in order for the new system to be born. So I'd rather again have Trump and Powell overseeing this essential merger of the U.S. Treasury and the Federal Reserve, then I can very much see how this would all be playing out if Hillary had won in 2016. But unless there's an extremely strong pressure on Trump, similar to when he did the meaningless airstrikes on Syria, he needs to understand that there is a massive popular backlash against these lockdowns, and that this is ridiculous to try. I mean, at least he's stuck up for the governors who are choosing not to implement the lockdown orders. And there's so few hospitalizations that are happening as a result of the lockdowns, that because no one's allowed to leave their homes and conduct their normal lives, that the hospitals are closing and they're running at half capacity, and they're losing money because they're used to more people coming in. And except for the New York metro area and a few other tiny pockets across the country, there is no mass COVID-19 crisis. It doesn't exist. It's all concentrated within these dense urban centers, right? And this is why people, at least probably plays into the whole 5G conspiracy. But again, there's cases of this all over the place, all over the world. And this is, I personally feel that the whole 5G push and trying to blame all the COVID-19 on 5G is another just flat earth psyop to make those who question the dynamics of the death count and the rationales for these lockdown measures and all this associated police state that's moving forward under the rubric of controlling COVID-19, right? These things need to be questioned. They need to be questioned very closely, and every single measure that the state takes needs to be scrutinized, especially insofar as we are not even allowed to leave our homes. So I know I'm saying this while I'm driving on the freeway, but basically every county in California, as far as I'm aware, is enforcing their own aspect of the governor's orders, if not more draconian aspects, which is stay at home. You can't even buy things, like even some of the stores across the country. You go to a Walmart that's open because it's essential, and you try and buy like a video game or a DVD, and they won't let you buy it because it's not an essential purchase, right? It's like they're literally deliberately tanking the economy, like they're just shooting themselves in the foot so that they can, so that they don't have to go on a hike, right? And that's basically what they're doing, and just punting the whole 2016 election along with it. It definitely hurts, Trump in a sense. Then it hurts Biden that mass crowds can't gather because nobody really wants to go see Biden anyway. And Trump's rallies are notoriously massive. But it's a very interesting point in history that we're at. And again, this is a crossroads and a membrane, and through which people will either take a vastly greater level of sovereignty in their health and move forward with one timeline, the optimum timeline, or people will accept to Bill Gates' plan of immunity certificates as a condition for lockdown removal, and implementing this across the world as basically a pretext for a global government, right? The mass vaccination of not just the COVID virus, but the whole CDC recommended vaccine schedule, and a social credit score, just like China already has and has since 2014. The United States, right? Report your neighbor, snitch on your neighbor, as the LA County officials say. Snitches get rewards, is what they're saying to people. Rat on your neighbor if they're having barbecue parties in the backyard and not social distancing, right? They are going for a blitzkrieg play for medical fascism as a result of this coronavirus. And whether it was deliberately released as a bioweapon or whether it was accidentally released as a bioweapon, it's very clear that it's not just some normal endemic bat strain that just infected somebody and then magically mutated to a huge degree and became transmissible human to human. This is a bioweapon. It has aspects of different diseases all kind of mashed together as a chimera, from what we know, but what we know is still very little. But I'm sure there's some, people at the recently closed down Fort Detrick in Maryland that probably know something about it, where they also did the LSD trials for a large part, right, back in the 60s, or actually the 40s and 50s. But anyway, chemical warfare has been a big part of the world for many, many decades, and this is just a tiny, tiny taste of what can happen when these, crazy viruses are kept in improper containment. And again, it's highly plausible that this was a bioweapon that China stole, and then it accidentally released from their facility. They didn't want to get caught with egg all over their face for releasing a stolen bioweapon, and so basically they cover it up for a month. They cover it up for a month and a half and tell the world that, yeah, it's not human-to-human transmissible, we've got it under control, and if you lock down your countries and restrict travel, you're all racist, come hug a Chinese person campaigns, right? And it was almost effectively exported, right, this bioweapon, whether it was deliberate or accidental at the beginning. It seems that it was almost deliberate, maybe deliberate on China's part to set up all those things and then reinfect the West with it, now that knowing that they were about to take a near fatal economic hit, right? If I'm going down, you're going down with me type mentality. It doesn't even have to be outright warfare for them to have made that strategic call. But it's very important that people resist Bill Gates and all of these imperial lackeys who are campaigning right now for the mass vaccination and the immunity certificates and a cashless one world economy. It's because they're going to do it. The price, the little coins that they're going to jingle in front of you is a universal basic income. In reaction to all the jobs that have been lost, and knowing that they now have total control over the financial system, they will offer you pennies as a token, so you can just sit home and play video games, and then they'll give you virtual reality, so you can do whatever you want inside your virtual reality headset. Most likely is the imminent timeline that the techno-fascists are rolling out for the masses right now, and hoping desperately that they bite, because at this point their hand is so weak, and the arm holding the hand is even weaker, and they really don't have much to go on. And if the people don't bite this bait, then I don't really know what they have left to go on. I don't think that there's really much at all. I think that this is, whether or not it's all just a mass conspiracy. It's not 5G. 5G is absolutely deleterious to one's health, and we should all be resisting 5G, but that's not what's causing coronavirus. Hang on. Hello.
Hey, are you on your way back?
Yes, I just came over the hill, and I'll be home in about 15 minutes.
So you stop at Golden One?
Actually, no, I have to stop at Golden One, so I'll be home in about 20-25 minutes.
Okay, so Chelsea's here now. I think she'll be here for a little bit longer, for about another half hour or so. Do you want to just keep out $500? We can pay her that today, and I'll pay her the rest when we get our Trump check.
Sure.
I was just a Trump check.
Sure.
Okay, I didn't know how much we're going to deposit. Is this deposit? Yes. I like that, Isla.
Alright, yeah, that's fine.
Say hi to Isla.
Hi, Isla. Hello, sweetness. I love you. I love you.
Hey, Daddy will be home soon, okay? Okay, we'll see you in like 25, 30 minutes.
Alright, I'll see you soon.
Okay, bye.
Bye. So anyway, yes, we should resist 5G on its own merits, but we should keep things in their own lanes, right? And even though there's the same people always promulgating these things, the conspiracies need to stay in their own lanes, right? 5G didn't kill Kennedy. 5G didn't fake the moon landing. 5G didn't build the secret space program, right? 5G is just one modality. It is a very important modality of control that the techno-fascists are trying to roll out, because these frequencies will enable the highly directional, individualized conditioning of a person electromagnetically. They will be able to fire various beams at individual people, not just at groups of people or areas, but at those frequencies, the high gigahertz, they are able to individualize the frequency, and especially with everyone carrying a 5G cell phone, which they are not, at least not yet. But nevertheless, the people in the cities will be bathed in this signal, right? Even if you don't have the phone, you'll still be swimming in the toxic soup. And so it's very important that people get out of the cities if possible, or at least stay on the outskirts. Do not be in the field of these 5G towers. And if you are, do what you can to create Organite and to bust those towers, to place Organiite stealthily and hide them near each of these tower stations. There's going to be a lot of them, so it's going to take a coordinated response, and it's not something that I can do by myself at this point. It wasn't something I could do by myself before, but now these towers are going to be ubiquitous. They're going to be everywhere. And so, spread the word, share the Organite construction videos, because it will make a difference. When they are not able to control the etheric field of a given space, it will make a difference. And, it's still going to be toxic to the biology, most likely, at those gigahertz, but at least the more malicious aspects of it will be mitigated, and the harm to biological tissue, and at least in theory from what I've observed in experiments, will be mitigated. But this is it, really. To the extent that people are strong, they will reject this mass tyranny, push that is happening under the rubric of coronavirus right now. But understand that it's much bigger than the virus. It's about the entire, credit bubble, the 2.5 quadrillion credit bubble that is unraveling right now. This is absolutely massive, and this will be bigger than the last financial crisis, and it will usher in hyperinflation and the push for the 4 that we named, which is the mass vaccination, your social credit score, the universal basic income, and what was the other one? Anyway, the medical fascism that Bill Gates has now devoted his full-time occupation to is going to be the primary battlefield now. And just as I've been calling it for years, the medical cartel is the last bastion of the cabal, and this is how they will try and take control over people, is by taking control over them medically, taking control over their bodies physically, and that is how they will, electromagnetically, also through 5G, again, totally separate conspiracies, but towards the same end, which is controlling and conditioning the human frame. And we will not submit. Aria, just like Isla before her, will not be vaccinated, and we will not be subjecting her, either of our daughters, to the California education system. We will do what we can to find loopholes in the mandatory vaccine law as it stands, and we will do our part to educate people, in other states who have not yet reached the level of communist tyranny that California has. But in the meantime, I'll at least enjoy the good parts of California, which is the paid family leave, and just be grateful that things are very good for the Thunderslice clan, because I understand that it is very hard for a lot of people right now, and it totally sucks because it's totally unnecessary. We do not need to have these lockdowns, and ultimately, if the virus is already mutating and we can't even get a lock on it genetically, then there's no point in a vaccine, and we just need to bite the bullet, and we need to let it circulate in the healthy population and control the at-risk groups. Let them social distance, let them shelter in place. We as a society will deliver everything they need to their door, but we cannot shut society down for the sake of 0.2 to 0.4% of society, which the ultimate mortality rate will not ultimately, I believe, turn out to be any higher than that range, because the number of asymptomatic cases, just like polio, just like all the rest, are going to be very, very high. Whether or not you have a virus or microbe in your body is not the ultimate determinant of whether you have the disease. How your body interacts, whether or not your lymphatic system is able to cleanse it effectively from the body and excrete it. All of these things matter more ultimately, and you know, it's why it's very, very important to take control of your own health and stop deferring to the medical authorities, the priests in white robes, when it comes to your own bodily autonomy. So that's my video today. Do not listen to Bill Gates, rather listen to Bill Gates, but only to counteract his message in the minds of your brethren and countrymen, because they are pushing hard now, and they will not. They're going for it. They're going for the basket for medical tyranny, and I intend, and I hope you will too, to stand in their way and smack that shit down. Denied. Anyway, much love to you guys, and I'll talk to you soon. Cheers.